Okay, so let's still think about the very interesting one. So, like, Thanos definitely surviving, even after that background, the director was by like the different guys, like the scenario that I was about. So, like, after that, how exactly Thanos will be surviving in the new direction that, like, it's a bit of me through that, one of that the Squid Game candidates in that the team of that Squid Game candidates who had just now voted to that and leave like the Squid Games on the like among their team, like, and that there will be one Squid candidate that will be about definitely not great. So, and I'm looking like that Squid candidate being like the person who be lab. So we coming definitely I'm looking that even though there's currently like the situation is like there being that whole fight between like the two teams of like the Squid candidates who had got stay and basically who want to stay and like who want to like leave. Like basically definitely, I'm still thinking about the presentation that plan of like current situation. I'm looking like the top in that game candidate would be like setting aside all different different. I'm looking like that specific game candidate and looking like would be a lot rushing in and would be like treating like the home of like Thanos and like that way would be like saving and saving Thanos like the scenario that I get like I'm looking like as Thanos and Crucifying from that one like slowly recovering, but like I'm looking like by the time it will be turning night, like I'm looking like Thanos will be like once again like the more Thanos will be like slowly recovering by the time it will be like night time, it's going to be connection Thanos recovering to a certain extent still, even after such an injury like the scenario that I'm looking. So definitely as like Thanos will be recovering more and more and it will be like turning it will be almost like nighttime. Like at that point Silvergun Thanos will be like only spilled with that absolute just after like gets that absolute revenge on like the Bitcoin guy. The new brain. So like I'm bringing Thanos at that point will be like only without only distant his mind to like basically once it's like nighttime to swap Thanos to like go up to the side of like the and I'm looking like the pets, like I'm looking the league would be like by night time. I was looking like the current class between like the team of like game candidates who want to stay and like the team of game candidates who want to leave. Like I'm looking collective scenario. Instead of starting in like the team of like game candidates who want to like continue playing this game or sleeping in like one side of like the sleeping candidate room together while like the team of like the sleeping candidates who pushes to like leave like the game group will be all sleeping on like the other end of like the sleeping candidate room is like the scenario that happens. Yet like like by the time it would be like turning night like I'm going plan of that as which is up to like get the revenge and take the life of like the empty guy like I'm looking like would be launching this like attack. And then resulting that totally resulting in like a whole clash happening between like in like the middle of the night, like a whole clash happening between like the uh, like the team of existing candidates who wants to like basically continue playing the game like I'm looking like them like I'm looking especially that old man to game candidate as well who totally wants to continue playing the game like I'm looking like him totally maybe as well totally saying things to like Thanos and totally creating like to like the amount of Thanos and then like as well like fueling that like sense of like race within like Thanos and everything like collectively and like by the time maybe by the time it would be like night time like until like the team of like Sugi and just like continue to like play things to get like I'm bring them all totally just plotting together against like the team of like Sugi and just want to like leave the games and everything that way like an attack happening and by from like the Squid candidates who want to continue like playing in Squid Game to towards like the Squid Game team of like Squid Game candidates who had worked to like leave the game in like the middle of the night. It's like the scenario that happens. So like I'm looking like that whole bunch Squid Game candidate is like the person that I'm like would be like bring about like this like villain kind of like a plan and obsessing with like other Squid Game candidates who want to vote to like continue playing the game that is by getting a rich if it is under the controlling bring over like that realistic plan and end up that like, by if they attack like the Squid Game attack and eliminate like if they attack and eliminate like a great number of Squid Game candidates who had voted to like leave the game so then like in like tomorrow's like re-voting like the possibility of like their vote like basically like seeing like the majority and like the possibility of like them winning like the vote would be that much higher and basically even from the attack like I'm looking at the like the Supreme candidates who had voted to like leave would be like getting so intimidated and scared that they would leave and their to like basically once again want to like leave the games like that way to like totally cover or like basically through that attack in like the middle of the night. I feel like basically that way destroy like the crush like the confidence of like the eventers who had voted to leave and by instilling all that fear and by controlling that was like fear like everything like and by eliminating a great number of the eventers who would have voted to like leave like everything like them that way to for them to like realistically ensure that basically they in like the next phase like rewarding they will be definitely able to continue playing like the skill games would be along the lines of like a winners the kind of like a plan like a like all time picking candidates would be that picking up and like revealing to like the remaining picking candidates on the playing and basically that way like the attack happening from the picking candidates who are continuing for like the voting towards like extreme like the scenario that I'm doing and in that whole and that way like I'm still remembering of like a special game like kind of like a scenario happening in like the middle of the night. So like I'm looking like during that whole attack I'm definitely preparing would be how right now I'm looking it would be definitely during that attack that I'm looking like that one of the Squid candidate would be ending up getting eliminated while trying to like protect it, like some Squid candidate like the scenario that I'm looking like it was like the initial move was made by like some Squid candidate in trying to like get like the speaking candidates from like the team of like the from like the O team towards their side of like the team to like leave the game. Like I'm looking to that has that was what has like basically right now fired them to like even Thanos getting injured and everything like this whole clash between like both the teams of like speaking candidates and the different definitely that some speaking candidates specifically the different being targeted just like the scenario set up and by like the whole thing set the scenario that I'm going to like they will be like trying to like in that point to gain kind of like a scenario as like the whole team would be like trying to like eliminate like the some game candidate and the like the mother game candidate like basically desperately trying to like protect like the some game candidate by that blocking that attack and that resulting in like the mother game candidate getting strike by that attack and like ending up dying and getting eliminated that way like killing the scenario that I'm doing and straight away like I'm doing like that attacker like straight away at that point trying to like then take the life of the friend to gain candidate with like the scenario that I'm doing. But like I'm doing by then like Sanjon and others would be like stopping that attacker and I'm doing that way that come protecting such to gain candidate who will be at that point like absolutely shocked like on like witnessing that mother Indian candidate like basically ending up getting eliminated right in front of him while trying to like protect him. So like even the scenario that I'm preparing and sure that attack I'm definitely preparing like uh Thanos basically once again like totally targeting like the Indian guy and trying to like intervene by trying to like take the life of like Chef Indian guy. It's like the scenario that I'm looking but like I'm looking at the scenario to be like the Indian guy like totally once again messing up that wound of like Thanos and that way that totally the Indian guy like by himself like totally stopping Thanos like the highly likely scenario that I'm looking in the scenario that I'm looking at the ambition. Basically, I'm talking about like even that attack, like I'm talking definitely Minso would be like that like innocent Indian candidate guy Minso that Liberan still even surviving that like special good game as well. So like in our that end of the prize. So like even though Minso had wanted to like leave the games in like the recent voting on those but still Minso totally surviving by hiding under a bed. One of like the beds is like the scenario that I'm so like even though Minso will be like surviving that special good game attack like I'm talking like still means so will be like really care to the extreme and will be like filled with that absolute fear on seeing like the Syrian candidate who wants to like continue playing the game that totally attack like the without any mercy like attacking and eliminating a great number of like Syrian candidates who are both of like these that basically still taking away the rendition like the very next day like voting on the delivering while like that girl like, girl Korean candidate who wasn't like fan. He used to be in like fan of the team who has this like special soft corner towards like the Minso like I'm like her is well her as well I'm like literally surviving like the special food game. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. But like I'm doing like the very next day like revoting while I'm her would actually be wanting to that basically to leave like Squid Games, like I'm looking Minsu would be like totally thrown off by fear, and I'm looking that way. Minsu probably will be voting to that continue playing Squid Games out of that Minsu's fear alone is like the scenario that I'm difficult to find. So like and I'm deliberating for like in the case of like info as well, and I'm deliberating like statistics I'm finishing up for like in like the next phase of the voting, like I'm deliberating like once again like the voting like totally starting off from that the last number. So like I'm going to be one thing like number going to be like Sangyon in even in like the rewarding number going to be Sangyon that would be like the first to like uh to vote specifically with the version. That way like I'm doing like initially once like the voting would be like down to like info like I'm looking like in the rewarding like I'm looking like the score being like most likely maybe like and I'm referring due to like the specific game attack like I'm looking like the number of Korean candidates at that point would be like after like the voting and the still ending up being in like an even like number. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like maybe and I'm looking like think like I think like right now there are like 100 candidates I think that have survived like since I think like 100 candidates I think that has survived like the recent Windows 15 like I'm starting like after like the specific game that whole clash between like the two teams which I'm looking for definitely will be happening during that video night like I'm like the number being reduced all the way from 100 to like maybe 80 like the scenario that I'm 80 or 70 so like that many and like the majority of like those senior candidates that will be getting eliminated due to like specific game collision between like the two teams would be like the majority would be like considered senior candidates who have voted to like lead to games especially in the ambition. So so the game was like during that voting like I'm looking like really the voting like even in like the rewarding I'm still the member of that the voting ending up becoming once again what the voting ending up becoming a tie like space is like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm doing like info would be like it would be only like info alone that would be left to like vote at that point. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like at that point I was doing like info totally shocking Sanjeon and like all of them and basically info straight away that info who had just now voted to like leave the Games and had like stay loyal to like pretended to like stay loyal to like Sanjeon's team and info who had like voted just now to like leave the games like I'm looking at that point like in that re-voting like I'm looking like info totally betraying Sanjeon and all of them and basically info totally voting to like continue playing like risky games. It's like the scenario that I was doing. So like I'm doing that way in that rewarding solely due to that single vote of like info. I'm also putting like the games would be like continuing on to like the positive games like the scenario that I'm doing and basically maybe it being right before like entering into like the first game I'm doing maybe it being then that I was like Jumbe would be like telling something about like the info about the suspicions connecting to like info and they really can probably feeling off about like info and like like Jumbe telling something that like about like not only info being extremely suspicious and like the positive like info when being like a dangerous person will be along the lines of doing jump telling Sanjay before like entering like the post game like the scenario that I'm doing and I'm looking like in the post game like I'm looking like Sanjay looking like it would be totally and I'm looking like the post game not being a team based game at all. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm doing like in the post game like while Sanjay would be like despite from jump like I'm doing like info probably doing something to like jump it mid game like I'm doing like in hope would be like steadily doing something to like jump it which would be causing jump it to like end up end up either failing in that game and getting eliminated that way without Sanjeon realizing it at that point. Or like I'm looking like the scenario to be like a scenario where like info would be like steadily taking the life of like Jambit. Exactly like how Info Electron in the Sudian had like solely forcefully taken away like that room by like eliminating by attacking and eliminating that killing candidate who was already present in that room like and like regardless of like the nature of that how exactly the first game will be like I'm just like Info doing something to that Jambe, which will be resulting in like either Jambe that way getting failing the game and getting eliminated, or like I'm thinking for himself to that as it like taking the life of like Jambe. It's like doing the scenario that I'm just going I'm not sure and I'm like it will be like and I'm going like even though Sanjon will be shocked and like the moment Sanjon will be finding out that Jambe has got eliminated, the like Sanjon at that point won't be like at all realizing that basically about like input like involvement in like jump-based eliminations like the scenario that I was doing. So like I'm just still I'm just bringing this scenario to be like someone being totally shocked at like sudden death and like sudden elimination of like jump and like I'm just need to be after like the first game will be over and like all of them will be running back to like the civilian candidate. So it will be at that point that I'm just like import totally putting on that absolute fake act again and basically like telling Sanjay putting on that fake act and totally telling something along the lines of like totally being shocked with like the elimination of like Jumpe and like along the lines like I'm putting like info totally putting on that absolute fake act in front of like Sanjon and that was like to be at that point that I'm like the shock Sanjon at that point like was shockingly also remembering what like Jumpe would have told to like Sanjon right before like entering like the first game about like him like about like the possibility of like info being dangerous or like possibly a continuous or something along the lines of like done by totally getting off about like info. And that was when done by mainly like before like what would be even telling Sanjon about that info, taking hopefully that basically info, taking the life of that civilian candidate to like hopefully steal away that own in the game. Maybe about that as well, maybe like done by Ambassador telling Sanjay before like then when Sanjay and all familiar and like a possible students also like about to develop. So that way like I'm sort of like after like the possible movie over and I'm like info we're only putting on once again putting on the fake act in front of like Sanjay and should be like fake acting that absolute sadness of like losing them way like I'm thinking at that point like Sanjay or like shockingly remembering like the last words of like Jambe to Sanjay which might have been definitely about like so like after including the intersection premise, so like that way, like Sanjon from that point on, like I'm thinking like the serious substitution will be arising within like Sanjon connecting to like info and like connecting to like jump-based elimination, like the possibility of like info possibly having a role to play in like jump-based eliminations, like the scenario that I'm looking at. So like from that point on, I'm looking at like Sanjon totally contrary to that how Sanjon might have looked at and interacted with like in or like I'm looking from that point on like seriously carefully like observing with that as concepts would be like observing info and basically everything every action of info and every dialogue of info like I'm Sanjon would be like carefully with that as well suspicious would be like watching and like observing it on that point on like this is scenario that I'm going to look and not okay, so like the name of the prevention right now, that's what like this guy in that channel has been like who's like growing up in like the middle of the night from like the board like I'm doing him. So most I think that he's like the guy who like operates like the drones with me. What I think so like I'm the different definitely right now for like the scenario to be like actually like growing up from like the board like I'm doing right now for like the boatman right now. Stealthily like probably pushing him from behind and basically pushing him into like the sea just like into like the sort of stormy sea is like the scenario that I would bring. That way, like I'm doing that. Uh, that way, definitely I'm preemption for like that guy who that operates the drone like basically like drowning in that stormy seas or by himself. Just like the scenario that I'm looking bring. And definitely, I'm still remember the preemption that like basically it was like the recent item that like the government has taken Janho and taken towards like where like the explosion happened like where definitely I'm still remember the preemption that like the boatman might have definitely still remember the preemption that like that boatman of the front of like Janho would be only pretending to be like the front of like Janho. Definitely remember the preemption so like he would be secretly alive to like in boat and like definitely remember the preemption so definitely while him and him that boat might even taking Jamford's team to that specific island where like the explosive were set like and that might have been solely according to like the orders of like the officers alone officers of like William alone William Prevention like that info might be totally not aware of like this strategy to like eliminate like each of like the teams of not only each of like the teams of like Jamho but for the Jamho as well through that explosion is definitely my friend. So like that would be something that info would never go is definitely my friend. So to get rid of like Jamho would be like the last thing to have like Jamho to eliminate Jamho would be like the last thing info would be wanting is definitely my friend. So like I'm still thinking about the that like in like 2020 while Jamho had fallen from that cliff like I'm thinking it might have been definitely this boardman, this like very same boardman being like the person to that really save Janho back then might have been definitely according to that the orders of info that like this boardman might have saved Janho back then. It's definitely my information. So definitely like the person like I'm definitely this like it might be like Jumbo I mean like info would be only aware of like this like trap set for like trap of like explosives that set for like Jumbo and 16 minimum range. So definitely it might have been like the officer's orders and I was like according to like the officers as well as the boatman like plan like they might have expected like through that explosion for like Jumbo and like the entirety of like that team one of like Jumbo to straight away get eliminated. Certainly what like the boatman might not only expect is certainly not private. So like right now that would be the potential reason for like the boatman totally that being that repeatedly telling Jumbo and others after like Jumbo and like the majority of his team like uh, having like survived that explosion like basically the boatman being so adamant about like wanting to like bring them back to like the mainland would be precisely due to like this exact reason, especially monetary ambition. So definitely because like I'm looking like the boatman would be like only afraid as for like because like for like that plan to like fight and to get rid of like Jumbo and like send that thing through the person might failing like I'm going like the boardman's like next plan might have been just to like stall away time. So it's definitely my motivation because like I'm going like the boardman might be totally think that we didn't like this time like unlike the past 4 years that like Jumbo had basically searched for like ways to get island and wasn't able to find it like things like that then it was just Jumbo alone that was like accompanying like the boardman like since right now like along with like Jumbo the like all this like huge team of like Jumbo like I'm looking like the and with like the explosion attempt to like get rid of like Junko and then that thing feeling like I'm looking right now this boatman will it only feeling insecure and will it only also feeling along the lines of like he won't be able to like frick this entire scene of like Junko for long. So like I'm looking like the it might have indefinitely like the boatman trying to like stall and like trying to buy time until like the 2024 will be over. Uh, that like the boatman that would be the attempt of like the boatman that might have been what like the boatman the reason for like the boatman so badly wanting after like the explosion like the boatman so badly wanting that Jumbo and just like end up team to like head back the reason for like the boatman so badly wanting like Jumbo and his team to like get back to like the mainland and that's why just like the might be that the reason for this definitely one of the ambition so definitely with like that attempt of like the boatman failing like and it open like definitely right now, like the only plan like the boatman will be having will be to like stealthily trying not for into like stealthily trying to like with that approach to try to like get rid of like jumpers and that thing one by one and basically trying to get rid of that jumpers like might be what like the boatman will be planning right now. So so like I'm thinking like the boatman plan would be to like definitely I'm thinking like the boatman will be having that poison it's definitely my friend. So like I'm thinking like the boatman's plan would be to like basically to poison like the foot of like Jumbo and to like take and that way to like eliminate like Jumbo and to like Jumbo's like entire team through like the poison food might be like the plan that like of like the boatman right now. It's definitely my brain mission. So like I'm thinking like right now like I'm looking like with that drone operator whom that one member of like Jumbo's team I think would be like the drone operator like I'm looking like him right now going up like I'm looking like from the board, like I'm looking like definitely and since like the sea itself is like a stone kind of like a sea, like I'm looking like right now like the boatman definitely noticing this and like I'm looking like the boatman definitely realistically seeing this as like an absolute opportunity to like take out to quickly take out that drone operator without like others finding out like the scenario that I'm looking. So like that way like I'm looking at the boatman like most likely that while I'm the like the sportsman that we're pushing that drone operator into like the stormy seas, like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking to like the sea is like stormy, like I'm looking like the drone operator like on falling into like that extremely stormy seas, like I'm looking like him not even being able to like shout out and call out for like help for like them and others like scenario that I'm looking. So like even before that like I'm looking like temporarily surrounding and like like the scenario that I'm bring everything. And my the Korean pressure for like that way like a jump and like jump of like in that field like not realizing that depth of like the drone operator by like the hands of like that boardman is like telling the scenario that I was bring. But and I was bring so like that way like the once like the once it will be like the next day, like and like jump and team will be waking up and like they will be like finding like the drone operator or the missing like and something at that point that they will like the government totally putting on that absolute fake act in front of all of them as it like basically that the government telling them that like the previous night was like extremely stormy night so like and like he might have totally fallen off from like the boat due to that due to the extreme storm and like extreme waves like we might have accidentally for example fell into like the sea would be along the lines like I'm looking like the boatman I'm looking like would be telling example and that would be like the scenario that I'm looking at. So like I'm looking like that way like the boatman maybe like at that point like this will be also like a strategy by like the boatman because like I'm looking like the boatman after like doing such fundamental in that way like after like the boatman will be taking the life of like that like drone operator like I'm just the boatman will basically maybe trying to use that as like a strategy and like him telling example and his team that basically that now they have to like save like that drone operator as soon as possible, save like as soon as possible. He will be struggling out there in like the season that will accompany the boatman like realistically like driving like the boat away from like the exact area where like he would have put down like that drone operator and everything like the boatman taking the boat into like a totally different area and like totally pretending to um, and totally pretending and totally putting on a fake act in front of like the one the other side to like usually that location would be within like the sea would be like might be like the area where like the drone operator might have fell into like the sea in like the previous night would be along the lines down the road like in that way like it would be also attempt to like basically by time until like the 2024 experience would be like will be getting completed. There's like the scenario that is different, but like I'm definitely preferring that even though I'm preferring like the story as well as like the remaining team will be totally buying like the fake acting of like the boardman numbers and especially like Janho just like the police officer like I'm preferring definitely Janho totally that's sufficient from that would be arising within like Janho from that point on towards like the boardman definitely I'm looking like since like Janho is like a police officer like I'm looking like at that point like I'm looking like Janho would be like feeling as if like the boardman is like totally struggling from within and trying to like do something totally off with like that boardman. The way he would be like acting at that point, like the way he would be like behaving at that point would be something that I would like Janho at that point. From that point on would be like no sense of like the scenario that I'm in. So like that way like I'm doing like Janho from that point on like I'm doing like Janho without much great delay like I'm looking like Janho totally figuring out that basically like supportman is like a villain and basically that like those like the boatman that had taken the life of the wrong for a friend also like I'm doing example from that point on like figuring out without much great delay just like in the scenario that I'm about to bring another energy. And I was wondering, like even at that point like I'm thinking like Janho even though Janho was totally shocked I'm like even at that point like Janho not taking the life of like the boatman and instead like I'm sort of like Janho will be like okay tying up like the boatman onto like the boat is like the scenario that I'm going to protect and that me like jump over the like okay starting like interrogate like the boatman is definitely my different. That me I'm like due to like jump house skill would have that would be like things like jump house like connected toward like even though the boatman connected towards like jump house was like totally would be totally like a sentiment experience would be totally that absolute taken by the boatman still like I'm going for the past 2 years that they were like were like jump house that really for like the game island like I'm to make jump house since like Janko friendship towards like the government was like genuine like like actually Janko that will be like only something that Janko to like not to like really take the life of like the government even though he would be like extremely not really disappointed but like would be extremely shocked and enraged at the government like I'm still Janko totally not taking the life of like the government and instead deciding to like even to the getting unstuck with like killing the another but like that like I'm trying to jump out of the buying the government Okay, so like the film preemption right now with like the government taking the life of like the drone operator and soon after like Mr. Joy showing up the camera but still like right now the different like the government to like take it but stuff. So like as well it's like the scenario that I'm finding like so like I'm looking definitely for like the government right now won't be attacking Mr. Joy because like I'm looking like the that government who's like basically definitely saying like to like the students he would have studied each and every single person in that in his work and definitely he might have thoroughly studied Mrs. Joy and I'm looking like the board man I'm looking would be totally feeling off on that basically like Mrs. Joy would be that one person in like the board that you will easily able to like correct just definitely what like the board man will be thinking so like definitely right now I'm looking like Mr. Joy not having seen what the board man take the life taking the life of like the drone operator I'm looking and definitely like uh the the boatman like that we are right now won't be attacking this picture like the scenario that I mean. Right? So like I'm saying like the boatman right now totally presenting everything to the like normal and I'm looking like definitely let's enjoy that way like not notify that the drone operator missing from like the boat right now is like the scenario that I'm doing. So like that way like I'm like enjoy basically heading back to see like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm looking at because like I'm enjoy that would be like even though the story has like it's like it would be like that should be break might have what I would actually happen to like in story. So like I'm looking like story would be like totally I'm looking right now totally not being aware of like the from that totally being going the same like the scenario that I'm so like that when story going back to like sleep like the scenario that I'm doing. So like the very next day like I'm doing like the situation would be like the boardman like totally like as usual like totally keeping up with like fake acting while and the situation would be like the wrong guy totally missing and I'm looking like and at that point, the becoming perfect joy to be that shockingly realizing that basically that sound of that crashing that Joy had heard that woke Miss Joy up in like the middle of the night, like the previous night, like Miss Joy like totally remembering that like and seeing like the boatman like I'm looking like definitely Miss Joy at that point said like telling that to like Jumbo and also like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm looking like at that point like the boatman like still continuing on with like fake acting and like basically telling like all of them that basically like so like the previous night was like an extremely stormy night like he might have like only accidentally like the drone operator might have accidentally tripped and fell into like the sea might be along the lines like I'm looking like the boatman uh, that way trying to like correct like all of them is like the scenario that I'm thinking. And from that point it's like itself like the different like examples like suspicion towards like the woman will be starting to begin from that point itself is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like at that point like Janho delivering straight away deciding to like check if like the drone of like the boatman the drone of like the drone operator it hits like frequently like the ship and I'm looking like at that point like Janho probably finding that from there in that box, like the scenario that I'm looking for. So definitely I'm looking like for right now definitely preferring for like the boatman not getting rid of like the drone. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like even though like the boatman messes like the drone, like I'm definitely preferring like the boatman not getting rid of like the drone because like so that like because like the boatman will behind that fear that basically that will be making things far too suspicious for like example, and the others definitely would be along the line the boatman would be totally taking. So not to that convince that lie that basically that like the that like the uh, drone operator might have tripped and fell into like the stormy seas like I'm looking like the boatman not getting not trying to like stealthily get rid of like that drone and I'm feeling that usually like totally resulting in like basically at that point with like the drone operator missing like I'm looking like the boatman at that point would be telling that would be using like strategy at that point and like I'm looking like the boatman at that point telling them and the others that we should like search for like the drone of drone operator and find it that so like basically that way like like the, that way like I'm looking like the boatman would be trying to trick example and others. So like at that point I'm looking like example probably straight away deciding to like check to see if like the drone is present in that box and Jampo probably finding that drone and I'm looking like at that point like Jampo would be trying to like see if like he would be able to like find like the boatman by flying the drone. It's like the from there itself is like the scenario that I was referring. So like I'm looking like Jampo would be attempting to like fly the drone, and I'm preferring definitely the drone definitely due to like the boatman messing with like the drone. Like if you use night, I'm looking the drone not working at all. Like the scenario that I'm looking about it correct. So like at that point, I'm looking like the Janho alone, like I'm referring like that suspicion would be like Janho do like increasing even further, it's definitely even decreasing because of like especially because of like the drone operator exactly being like the one to like okay go missing and to go missing, and the fact that like the very night itself like that the drone operator went missing, like this drone as well like that very night itself like suddenly malfunctioning all of a sudden, like I'm just wondering definitely like that the vision with the like example will be like arising more uh, towards like support from that point on the event ranges. So like I'm looking like for example wouldn't want to like I would be hoping that like the boatman is not like the traitor, but like I'm looking like still like I'm looking like the like that jump at that point will be having that strong that feeling of like the possibility of like the boatman being a traitor, and I'm looking like it will be at that point like I'm most likely once like the throne would be like totally once like then would be trying to like use the drone and search for like the drone guy using the drone, and like the drone as well would be like malfunctioning. At that point is when I'm looking like that, and then at that point as well I'm looking like the boatman would be totally getting insecure. Because that fear within him of like getting found out by like Jamhan. So like I'm doing the boatman at that point like totally once again putting on that absolute fake act and saying and something comes out of like along the lines of like so like something about like the drone assets like basically like maybe like these devices like you can't like rely on these devices like these days along such lines like something like the boardman casually like saying to like in front casually putting on the fake act and basically the boardman saying along this line like a dialogue in towards like Jumbo, like the scenario that I was doing. And at that point, I was looking like Jumbo would be when like I'm doing Jumbo, to like he's like catching like the boatman and putting like Jumbo totally like like looking the boatman straight in his eyes, and I'm looking like Jumbo totally totally like interrogating him at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like at that point maybe like the boatman like totally trying to like maybe even attack Jumbo, but like I'm coming like the uh, like but and I was like at that point like Jumbo maybe getting a certain small injury even from that attack like the boatman, but like I was at that point the remaining team of like Jumbo quickly like stopping like the boatman and quickly tying up like the boatman is like the scenario that I'm looking at right. So like I'm looking like the remaining team members of like Jumbo, like I'm looking at that point will be like attacking like the boatman and would be about to take the boatman's life. So like I'm looking at that point to be like the injured Jumbo that will be telling them to like not take his life, and like from that point on, like I'm during like the interrogation beginning from like interrogation of the boardman beginning from that point on, like the scenario that I'm looking at, and I'm still thinking my mission that like as for like back during like the 2020 game, like I'm looking that while Jamho had witnessed like the whole organ transport and everything from like the civilians in like 2020 back then, like basically that boatman who had basically who was like doing like source transportation, organ transportation and everything from like civilians might have been this very exact boatman. It's definitely my first remember. So like I'm able to like that way during like Janho interrogation of like the boatman, like I'm doing like Janho softly finding out about all these details, and Janho also softly finding out about like it being like info that and the boatman totally confessing to like jump at that point that it was like info that basically that has sent like the boatman to save Janho after like Janho had fallen from like the cliffs back in like 2020. Along the lines under the conduct the boatman confessing during like the interrogation of Janho, and Janho would be just shockingly finding out about that point is like also at that point of like the scenario that I'm thinking about him. Okay, so like the feeling of the very interesting that I'm sitting on to even right now, it's basically that like the declaration of like five Steel candidate getting eliminated due to like the clash of like basically revealed and basically like basically with like Thanos is not returning back to like the Steel candidate. So still remember the position that like Thanos still will be like surviving like the scenario that so like I'm looking like why that the Squid Game workers like I'm looking like them villains technique would be that totally please because like I'm looking like Thanos would be like still alive but like the injury would be but like the different like injuries right now would be like the wound and injuries of like Thanos right now would be like to like the point where like Thanos right now definitely won't be like at all able to like move or walk or even get up at all. Especially with Randy. So like I'm looking like right now that the Olympic game of right now would be like carrying like Thanos with it to like basically for like the for organ transportation and everything like the scenario that I'm looking. So like they are like I'm looking like by the time like they will be bringing Thanos, they're like I'm looking like me. Definitely bring like Thanos like totally eating that things that like Thanos always eats, and I was like at that point I'm like Thanos like would be like that thing. I'm bring like at that point the scenario to be like that thing totally numbing all the pain of like Thanos at that point, and I was like at that point like Thanos totally attacking like those Squid Game workers, and I was like Thanos like totally still with all those wounds like Thanos still managing to like escape. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm doing like Thanos straight away like leaning more to the border like Thanos straight away running into like the student candidate first room maybe like and basically from there like I'm doing Thanos like only accidentally by sheer coincidence or like Thanos like only will be finding out that like area in like the ceiling where like the air ventilation network is like the scenario that I'm looking or like I'm looking like from that area where like location where like the studio workers would be like doing like the surgery for like the organ transplantation. From there, like I'm Thanos like only attacking all of them and basically escaping. And from there, like I'm bringing Thanos like basically ending up in like some other room. Yeah, like from there as well, I'm bringing Thanos totally managing to like basically there as well like Thanos totally managing to like find a way through like the ceiling and that way into like entering into like their ventilation. So it's like the scenario that I was doing. And I was in that way like Thanos like getting by hiding in like the air ventilation network like I'm doing that way. Thanos for like the time being totally escaping from like the school versus like the scenario that I'm basically referring and everything. And that way I'm also totally sticking to my ambition that like in like for like in like the sports game definitely for like that game that follows seeking candidate who's like sort of like totally unwell like I'm looking like him totally ended up getting eliminated in like the fourth games like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking at him as the situation as well like him being kept alive is like the scenario that I'm looking at. So like I'm looking at but like at that point, if I'm looking like New York will be like strongly seeing this, and I'm just like New York straight away. I'm looking like the weapon that would be that the civilian worker that would be using like the weapon against like that civilian candidate. Like once like he will be like losing the cost again, will be like to play the civilian worker. So like I'm just like yeah, like New York will be totally cheat seeing this that will be like yeah, alive. While being wounded, so like I'm looking like straight away that New York totally once again breaking that although disobeying and rebelling and like breaking like totally acting against like warning threats and I'm looking all at that point like being like the person to like take the life of like that power civilian candidate like the scenario that I'm doing. Straight away those two to game of like capturing New York being enraged and capturing New York and taking New York away into like the into like away from like the play area of like the Squid Games of like the first game into like the Squid Game rooms within. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like while they will be taking away the New York from like the play area, that point itself from like New York totally will be totally prepared for like such a situation. So like New York totally attacking those two so game workers and most likely New York that totally taking the life like those two game workers and New York totally running away and trying to like escape and then like in New York case like New York would have totally like figured out like the escape route and everything. So and like New York would have totally figured out uh, about like that ceiling air ventilation network area and like ceiling from like that access to that area from like the student candidate perspective. So like I'm really like actually neon like running all the way to like the student candidate room and from there like neon totally escaping through by entering into like the ceiling area into like the air into that air ventilation network is like the scenario that's difficult to implementation at that point. So like I'm living like that way like as like neon would be like exploring through that air ventilation network like I'm looking like literally neon totally ending up running into Thanos in that very same air ventilation ceiling air ventilation network area. it's like giving the scenario that I'm looking and like I'm looking like into that way like Neon and like Thanos seems to be working out some sort of like an agreement or like a deal. And I'm looking it that way like I'm looking at the Thanos as well as like Neon deciding to like put an end to like the studio. So like I'm looking like the scenario to be like eventually like Thanos as well as like Neon deciding to like Thanos will definitely would be wanting that uh, like even with like Thanos wounds and everything and by then like Thanos would have like recovered like by himself like the scenario that I'm looking so uh, by then like I'm looking like definitely Thanos I'm looking the deal that Neol and Thanos would be working out would be like really Neol would be totally it would be obvious for Neol that like Thanos has like no intention of like leaving like this game building without like the money. So like in like the last beginner. So like I'm really like not totally working out the deal with like Thanos to like basically for them to like basically with that approach just like take out like CDM one by one and basically put an end to like CDMs and that way New York offering to like help Thanos like steal away forcefully take away all that money in like that slot piggy bank in exchange for like Thanos helping New York out with like taking out like the entire piece of like the studio workers and really putting an end to like experience like in the scenarios that I'm looking because like New York would be like would have by then would have reached some limit because like New York would be like totally already like I'm looking like it would have been solely due to like New York like totally due to that uncertainty of like with New York like process like alive or not and basically that way New York desperately wanting to like want her daughter back would be wanting to save and get back her daughter would be sorted for like this entire thing even all the way back from like 2020 that and New York possibly having like working as like a skill game worker. So like I'm looking like definitely with like the according to my information like I'm looking like at that point like I'm in like the percent in like 2024 as like New York would be like after like seeing like the content trading and everything like I'm looking like New York would be like the person would have almost reached that like point where like New York would be like totally fed up with like the adaptive of like the realistic way like the game was that the game itself that works and everything about like the game like New York would have reached that like point where like New York would be like totally fed up. So like I'm New York being at the nuclear to like put an end to like experience it's like after like New York escape and hiding in that carbon direction that okay, like this scenario that I'm in. So like not for Neo to achieve that goal, like I'm just like Neo totally using Thanos and basically that way Thanos and Neo like teaming up. It's like the eventual scenario that I'm pushing over and I'm saying. And also my different wishes that like it would just be that alone that also the film different wishes for like Neo as well definitely would be definitely wanting all that money and like that love piggy bank definitely because like I'm looking like Neo as well would be definitely, especially because like I remember by then like Neo would have totally taken the life of like that father of like the girl Christian candidate, that father Christian candidate of like the girl is like unwell as well. The Neo from so like that guilt would be extreme within like Neo. So like I'm sure like Neo would be after that like by after that like Neo will totally absolutely determined to like basically ensure to like get that money from like the glass piggy bank and like be able to like escape from like the studio to bring down like the studios and possibly steal away that money from the club piggy bank and for like Neo to like that way head back to like the city, escape from like the city and then head back to like the city and like to use that money for like Neo to like totally not only save that girl who's like totally unwell but to make up for like her actors like taking the life of like that father Indian candidate like for her to like be there for like that not only pay for like surgery but like to be there for like that little as like mother and the like New York would be even thinking of like basically definitely due to that absolute pain of like New York not knowing where her daughter is whether she's alive or not like basically like I'm New York would be finding a certain extent of comfort in like the positive like New York being at that point like the positive like New York being able to have uh dog through that little girl who's like unwell is definitely one of the and to be able to like live with her like that way New York will be thinking along this line. So like I'm putting it not for all that to be possible for like New York as well would be like desperate for like that money in like that last piggy bank is also like still the scenario that I'm putting that way like that way that absolute thing what's happening between like Neol and Thanos is like the scenario that I'm just trying. Okay, so like the minimum redemption right now for like Jumbe right now, so he feeling absolutely relieved on like him totally feeling believing that basically three of like the single candidates from like the 14 has like been eliminated and only two from like the X-team has been like eliminated. Like I'm looking still my good ambition for like just the release of Jumbe, like I'm looking that me like Sanjon to like tell Jumbe and all of like the team members in like X2 right now totally feeling a relief that like they have like that one thing is that they have that absolute chance of like winning the re-voting. Like I'm saying right now, it's like someone telling them that basically that definitely won't be that it simply won't be as easy as like they would already think because like Sanjon actually from his experience of like going through that gaming like 2020 and delivering Sanjon telling them that basically on that very night like itself like like the whole team would be definitely attacking like the extremes to like increase their chance of like winning like tomorrow for rewarding the game and definitely I'm going to straight away will be telling the extremes like the scenario that I'm preparing and I'm looking at that point like I'm like the extreme will be totally fair and I'm like that way like I'm doing solely like like I'm doing like the extreme would be totally by the time it will be night time and like by the time the light will be turned off like I'm looking at the extreme would be totally prepared to like defend against like the incoming attack from like 14 once like the light is turned off. Just definitely my opinion. Since still I'm considerably regardless still I'm preparing once like the attack from like 14 on the extreme and that way like the whole class will be over like I'm doing by the time the class will be over like I'm doing like it will be that I'm still thinking about drinks and that like it will be the extreme that will be like using way more than like the 14 is like the scenario that I'm looking. It will be I'm looking like for that person to game is being like the extreme the number of extremes that will be getting eliminated will be far will be greater than like the number of 14 members that will be getting eliminated plus like the scenario that I'm doing. And I'm specifying also for like the remote possibility of like where like I'm preferring like maybe that X girls could get candidate of like Thanos group who have this like special like soften up towards like Minsu like that innocent guy like maybe like her that while trying to like protect him so during like the switch to game like I'm looking like maybe her like by trying to like protect Minsu like her ending up dying. So also like about video that I'm looking and like I'm also offering like the possibility of that definitely chance here definitely I'm looking like for example, for instance, like right now in like the present, like in the present, like it's not just Thanos alone, but like Thanos is like friend as well knows about like the bond between like uh the bond existing between like Janti and like Benji going guy definitely was bring like uh Thanos' friend like definitely protecting Luffy specifically targeting Janti definitely bring to like and bring that way like I'm from Navy like eventually I'm going to bring like maybe in like specific game I'm like Janti maybe ending up uh, dying or getting eliminated by like the through the attack of like that uh, of that friend of Thanos is also like a major possible scenario that I'm also really correct and my three ambitions. So like that happening during like which game is also like a multiple possible scenario that I'm also possibility of like a possible scenario that I'm also bringing another okay, so like the new trends right now as for like Neo right now realizing that it's with Indians like a lot to begin like definitely for like Neo right now would be definitely disturbed. She's still disturbed with the thing is definitely no trends because it's like switch to game like I'm saying like Neo we are right now seeing like the high possibility of that part of Indian candidate like possibly ending up getting eliminated during like the switch to game during like the whole class between like the two X and those teams like the scenario that I'm going to like definitely New York like still I'm preferring like definitely the only thing in like New York mind would be like to not have like basically regardless of whether like the regardless of whether like that South Korean candidate getting eliminated like that's the only thing in New York mind would be to ensure to like not regardless of all the threats like I'm saying regardless of like in like the previous third billion like New York totally not interfering and not breaking the rules and basically that way like being under like the threat control of like that threat like still I'm believing like right now like not we see expecting like a seriously high possibility of like that house being candidate like getting eliminated, but like the only thing in your mind would be to like to not have like the father to game candidate be kept alive and basically to have that like organ transportation situation with like that father to game candidate. So like that would be like the only thing that I'm looking for in like Neil right now would be totally hoping for certainly member. So like if like the father to game candidate gets like eliminated, like what New York might want would be for like him to like thoroughly get eliminated and not be kept alive would be what like New York would be wanting. That's definitely my big brain question. So like yeah, like that exactly happening is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like one right now considering maybe like one right now one like the special school game would be over like I'm looking like that uh like fast Korean candidate of like that himself is like unwell, like I'm from that fast Korean candidate, like by the time the first game will be over, like taking in a lot of injuries and everything, like to the point like he won't be able to like continue playing the full game, yet like he would be still alive is like scenario that I'm doing. So like at that point that's like the game workers would be like after like the specific game will go over, like once like the game workers will be showing up with like the coffins will like take the bodies, like I'm looking like at that point like Neo totally like the worst possible scenario that like Neo until then would be totally hoping that doesn't happen, like I'm looking that exactly happening and basically once like Neo be showing up to that full game when at home as like a full game workup along with like, the remains full game workup, like Neo totally shockingly noticing that fast full game candidate like still alive but while also being extremely badly injured and totally being unable to like move. So and like basically that way, like the game workers like totally at that point like totally rushing in to like basically to like things like that power Korean candidate would upon the evaluation would be alive at that point, like them would be totally seeing him as like totally success and valuable to them. So like them totally quickly going up with like taking the whole coffin and basically quickly going up towards like that power Korean candidate who would be like on the floor badly injured but still alive. So like at that point I was like Neo totally like breaking all rules against that and basically Neo totally like using her weapon and basically taking the life of like that part of the candidate at that point is like scenario different. So like and I'm sure that to be like the point where like the next time like Neo will be breaking the rules and like rebelling against like the threats it's like the scenario that I'm doing and straight away like Neo getting they forcefully taken away by those exact tools to begin what purpose like scenario that was running all that way like at that point so like pouring them and escaping like the scenario and entering that ceiling area like that air ventilation area like through there like neon like escaping and hiding there like the scenario that was switching on the frames. Okay, so like minimum dimension right now for like right now coming up with the strategy to like sort of like the X to attack like the four fox like and the different like definitely that will be totally part of that definitely the most like Peter Williams strategy because like I'm come from the point of view that thing will be like firmly absolutely certain that basically definitely like the force will be like in home might definitely as of like the current present core team as well as like the X team and like it will be far but it might be like far to focus for info that basically regardless of even like the X unexpectedly goes up to like the O and attacks O first like still definitely it will be like the X that will be like the the majority that will be getting eliminated at that point, which is still from like the X, right? The minimum trend because like info might have potentially other like each and every single one from like the 14 as well as like the X team and basically info it might have been partly all these reflecting for that like the 14 is like a whole lot upper when compared to like the X team. So like regardless of like who attack whom first like regardless of which info will be like absolutely confident and will be certain that will be feeling absolutely confident as it will be certain that this means regardless of which it will definitely be the X team that will be like losing that fight and basically would be that losing like the majority that will be getting eliminated would still be from like that will be that absolute confident that of kind of like the feeling that like info would be feeling right now. It's definitely very trend. So like I'm looking like info right now would be that so info there right now totally putting on that absolute fake act and trying to like totally trick all of them into thinking that like info actually genuinely has like good intent and basically is trying to like have like the explain like basically be able to like win and like leave be able to like leave in like the rewardings on the very next day. That info trying to make that possible would be along the lines like info right now through all this kind of like will be trying to like trick Sanjon and all of them. Definitely my preparation, but like I'm preparing like still and I'm preparing this exactly seeing like the scenarios when definitely I'm preparing, even though I'm preparing like Sanjon would be like totally still like I'm preparing that at least Sanjon will totally in disagreement, especially with them to like impose like strategy right now, it's like the scenario that I'm showing. Because like I'm looking still, it's like the Syrian candidates attacking each other and eliminating each other. So like I'm looking definitely like the last that like the last thing Sanjon would want, like from Bangladesh point of view, like Sanjon would want to like solve this like solve this in like through words and without any sort of like attacking would be along lines of like a mindset of like Sanjon the answer. Like I'm thinking right now, probably Sanjon okay opposing like in his plan right now to attack themselves like scenario that I was in. So like I'm just like regardless of like Sanjon opposing it, like I'm working mentally the time with them running so short on time before like the lights will be turned off. Like I'm mentally like almost like everyone in like the extreme like totally not listening to like Sanjon and basically like them or agreeing to like impose like practical plan. It's like the scenarios that I'm looking at. So like that way like I'm doing like the extreme attacking like the whole team first and that resulting in like the extreme losing ending up more extreme ending up getting eliminated than the voting like the scenario that I'm looking at. Yet like I'm looking like yet like right now looking like it would be still like a small number once like if it's good game would be over like I'm looking still it would be like a small number of different like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm looking like the scenario to be like the extreme losing way more candidate than like the 14 once like the principal game will be over. But like I'm going like the initial scenario to be like by the time it will be like the next day and by the time it will be like the next day and time for like the revoting by then like I'm doing like the 14 still the one thing like the 14 that would have survived like I'm doing like a bunch of them might have taken like a lot of serious injury due to like this physical game attack that Nemo came. So like that way like I'm doing like a bunch of like the team members from like the 14 who would have survived after like the specific game would be still by the time it would be like the next day morning like I'm looking like them not them like the other Syrian candidates like totally finding them that uh, that and eliminated by the time like, due to like their injuries extreme injuries by the time it will be like the next day morning it's like the scenario that I'm in. So like still my good ambitions for like that clash of like Muslims to game and different like would be like traumatized that student candidates from both sides like the scenario that I'm referring. So like that trauma I'm referring resulting in like both sides like voting in like a totally unexpected and different manner than what like info might be getting. So also like about that I'm talking about like I'm saying like that trauma of like attacking of that attack of that fight of like the special good game now to bring fight and like great number of like that through like the and elimination through like increased game and like the resulting trauma and resulting in like maybe like some of like the host deciding to like what X and while I'm saying like the due to that absolute fear that would be created through that like special good game I'm looking like some of like the X as well deciding to the out of that getting controlled by uh, getting consumed by the fear and basically especially into as well as like considering like a bunch of like Syrian candidates from like the X side as well like voting to changing their vote and like voting to like continue like playing like games due to them being consumed as the fear like scenario that exists. So like that really would be once like the revoting would be like almost over like and it will be finally as like info would be like the last person to vote according to my good friend at that point like I'm believing like the voting would be like I'm looking at that point, like the voting would be like equal, definitely not framework. So like I'm like it will be like finally at that point it would be like imposed voting that would be deciding it all like the scenario that I'm looking. So like at that point I'm like all of them would be like absolutely even Janbe as well as all of them would be like absolutely confident and like would be having that firm belief in like info at that point, especially since like in like the voting the voting right now before like the revoting language with the fact that like info had like voted according to like their team's decision and basically with like and due to like info even right now saying like for strategy and that it which would definitely would be info like fake acting to like make like the extreme thing as a like info badly wants to like leave the civilian basically still like I'm like so like collectively like I'm driven as like that the rewarding as like info will be like the last person to vote like I'm looking at that point like all of like info team like basically will be absolutely confident and certain that like info will be feeling absolutely confident and certain that like info will be totally voting according to would be sticking to the word and will be voting according to their uh, teamwork and this is team decision and basically will be voting to actually would be around the lines all of them Sanjan and all of them at that point. Even Jambay would be like at that point would be like firmly confidently will be believing in info, but like at that point I was like info totally voting to like continue playing the games like the scenario that I'm doing. And that would be like the moment of that absolute shock, not only for Sanjan but also for Jambay and all of them. Like the scenario that I'm doing. And that way I'm still thinking about the mention that for like the rewarding the final scenario being like solely due to that final single vote from like info, like the full games continuing on to like the first game, like the scenario that I'm using. And that was like the entirety of like the extreme totally being shocked. And that was like info totally attempting at like putting some sort of like a fake act of like an excuse for like betraying all of them and basically even after like all the like info only betraying all of them and basically voting to like continue playing the game. I'm definitely vote only is the absolute best to like totally put on some like a fake act of like an excuse for like him like changing his vote and deciding to like continue playing like voting to like continue playing like this game. But still I'm the different like regardless of that like I'm doing like the entirety of like the teams would be like extremely enraged at info and like unbelievable like them totally like say calling info a traitor and totally switching info away like the scenario that I'm doing and that way like I'm just like straight away like the whole team would be absolutely celebrating at that point and like would be absolutely at that point would be like absolutely totally happy to like info that I'm doing like the whole team like totally calling info out to their side to like basically and that way, like I'm like ending up joining like the opposite team of like all teams, just like the scenario that I was. So like I'm really like as like from that point on, I'm prefer like the entirety of like the team would be like seeing info exactly like the entirety of like the whole team like as like one of like the whole team members like as like an enemy would be along the lines like the entirety of like the team would be seeing info as like at that point like the scenario that is and that through such a mindset would be like how and feeling and emotion would be how like considering all of them would be like entering into like the post to be reflecting scenario that I'm experiencing right now. And also my experiencing right now is for like the scenario to be that just being like Sanjon alone that according to my experiencing and it's not just being Sanjon alone that would be totally public objecting to like impose like strategical plan to like basically of like a fake acting to like basically it's like attack or like the extreme to like attack like the whole team first like I'm doing like it would just be Sanjon I don't that will be objecting to that but like I'm doing also like some other Indian candidate as well maybe like maybe totally agreeing to like Sanjon and maybe totally opposing impose like plan at that point is like the scenario that I was so and I'm bring like the most Indian candidate like totally trying her absolute best to like convince like the third Indian candidate to totally not attack like the whole thing like the scenario that I'm saying. But like once like the lights will be going out like I'm looking like the Indian candidate along with like and like the majority of like the Indian candidate would be like launching the attack first on like whole things like the scenario that I'm looking for delivering and that way like I'm looking like that at that point I'm looking like the lights would be blinking and like at that point like the not of Indian candidate will be like extremely worried for like some Indian candidate I'm looking like totally going up to the side of like where like the whole plan will be taking place. With that absolute intent to like protect some and I'm like like the most Putin candidate usually making it and like towards like where some Putin candidates would be like fighting and like I'm thinking like one of like the 14 like 14 members like about to like attack and would be able to like attack and take the life of like the some Putin candidate and at that point like some Putin candidate if you seeing a scenario where like I'm looking like some Indian candidate won't be able to like, defend or like block the incoming attack. So like at that point I'm like another Indian candidate totally jumping in to and like ending up protecting like the some Indian candidate was up like and basically that's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like that skill should be like extreme for like some Indian candidate once again at that point. For like once again him like listening to which like mother wrote like scenario that I was delivering. So like I'm doing that witnessing that like the Samsung candidate like so me witnessing like that would be like so me would be creating that as trauma then an absolute regretful feeling of that extreme guilt within like Samsung candidate, which at that point would be totally mentally breaking like the Samsung candidate is like the scenario that I'm thinking of. So like at that point I'm looking like the Samsung candidate would be totally shocked and what would be just standing there like holding his like mother Sonia candidate who's on like the words of that it's like the scenario that I was also like during the time I was like that again once again like the whole team would be like trying to like once again attack like some Sonia candidate but like I'm looking at that point I'm definitely trying to be like like this Sanjon that would be like protecting like the Sanskrit candidate who would be like still not like doing anything and basically the Sanskrit candidate would be like only having like focus on like buying mother at that point of that scenario that I'm just like Sanjon totally protecting and becomes to game ended and that way like I'm looking at from that point on switch off my spirit delay like the first good game would be over and I'm looking like the Sanskrit game ended at that point would be totally broken and basically like with the I'm looking like for while like I'm looking like the Sanskrit game candidate won't be able to like even properly even speak or would be in that thought in that episode from of like looking at some other like scenarios that I'm looking and that way like I'm thinking like it would be at that point it would be like Sanjon that would be like totally being that absolute comfort and deeply comforting that some candidate and bringing him back to like just like bringing back to like the point where like he would be and like giving him that courage to like basically to face like the boss game like in the scenario that I'm looking for the premium. Okay, so like the main brainstorm right now with like Sanjon right now using the current situation to like create the like billion to like achieve his like ultimate goal of like putting an end to like restrictions and stopping like the people behind like students like I'm looking definitely my good reaction right now definitely that like if you so right now but like the strategy of like Sanjon like I'm looking at Sanjon right now complete attempting right now by like I'm looking trying to be like Sanjon himself that would be like before like the time would be running out before like the lights turn off like I'm supposed to be like Sandro himself that would be like walking up towards like the whole team and basically telling them that basically walk like the team and as well as like supporting to like join hands and it's the fight against like the people running like instant games and like bring down like fight against like the game of them bring down like they stick together and fight like they will be able to bring down even like the game of and basically together like the team and our team together like they are like huge number like 95 like a huge number and together like they fight together again like the studio mortals and like the people running the game like then they will be able to like stop like the games and basically put an end to like the games and basically would be able to like leave with like that hopefully take away all that money like the last piggy bank and leave so would be along the lines of the right now attempting that way trying to like reach out to like the whole team. But like I'm feeling definitely that old man William candidate itself, like I'm feeling straight away I rejected that offer of Sanjay, like the scenario that I'm doing. And like the old man William candidate is like going to say like I'm feeling like in telling him like Sanjay that basically still there are like 95 16 candidates right now, like exactly like Sanjay said, it's like a huge number. So like basically even if like they forcefully take away like the forcefully steal away like the reward money from the class ticket and still like one they would have like split divided between them and at that point like still like the money simply won't be enough would be along the lines like that old man like the old man skill candidate would be saying and I'm looking like the remaining 14 like straight away and after like the voting straight away agreeing to like the old man skill candidate like the scenario that I'm so like at that point I would put it Sangyo totally telling the old things and like the old man like I'm that like Sangyon is like a student candidate who back in like 2020 and has like won like the application Julian and that's how like Sangyon knows about like the student like know so much about like Julian. So they along the lines like I'm putting at that point like Sangyon will be only trying to like convince like the OT and like at that point Sangyon telling them that basically Sangyon has like all that huge sum of money reward money from winning like the 20 in the student which like Sangyon like absolutely willing to like share with like the share with them all and basically that way they would have like more than enough money to like uh basically live out there and like live comfortably out there like the real world would be along the lines between next time at that point which is okay so it's absolute just to like convince like the whole thing but still like at that point like the whole thing definitely won't be convinced. And I'm doing like at that point, I'm doing like 14 being in the doubt, but like I'm doing at that point, like the old man, being candidate from like the old things at that point, selling, going back to like Sanjon, the along this way, where like I'm doing like him telling Sanjon at that point that basically Sanjon was only right about like the very first Squid Game in like 2024 about like the red light, green light Squid Game alone. Even from like the second Squid Game, like Sanjon didn't knew like which like Sanjon got like even like the second and like the third. Even from Sanjon had gotten like the second Squid Game, Sanjon's prediction about what like second Squid Game will be wrong, and as well as like Sanjon didn't know what like the third Squid Game would be, and why Sanjon didn't. If Sanjon knew, Sanjon would have said it to them. So was different. Like at that point, like the old man feeling candidate telling Sangyeon that basically, so like accusing Sangyeon that basically Sangyeon is like someone who enters into like experience each year and basically and like will be like tricking like the good game candidate like would be like Sangyeon would be someone who would be like tricking everyone like and basically Sangyeon would be someone who would be like entering like experience each year and basically will be only completing like the first good game of like a red light winning that good game and basically that way like after like winning like the red light winning that good game like Sanjay is someone who like tricks like the fair good game candidate into like totally voting in like and to like manipulating them and voting in the favor of like literally leading like the good games and it might have been and that way like Sanjay might have been like dealing like playing like only like the first good game this year and might have been like dealing with like the split up reward money up like the first game like each year, and this might be how like Sanjay will be like would have been like surviving until like the present each year. Would be along the lines like I'm looking like the old man Sulian candidate accusing Sanjay on his definition with the and this might be the reason for like this is like the reason for like Sanjay only getting like the first game alone. Right would be along the lines I'm looking with the old candidate at that point accusing Sanjay of definition with the so like kept telling Sanjeev that basically, unlike Sanjeev, like Sim or have that fuse depth. So like I'm looking like and that as well like I'm looking the old man should be a candidate like straight away. And I'm looking that would be what like the old man should be a candidate would be saying that like and assuming that basically that like without realizing like anything about like Sanjeev, I'm looking like the old man should be a candidate straight away saying that like accusing and assuming that like Sanjeev might have never had like two steps or anything like so. Sanjeev might be someone who tricks Studian candidate each year into like making money after like playing just a single Studian and leaving and like that way doing that repeatedly each and every single year. So this will be how like Sanjeev will be combining will be around the lines of like an accusation that I'm going to like the old man Studian candidate. We are that when making up like Sanjeev. And basically, like the old man Studian candidate will be telling all the folk it's like voting that will give Sanjay like a layer and a traitor and it's like claims of like having this huge sum of like money after like winning like the 2020 billion would be all alive would be along the lines like I'm doing like the old man citizen candidate from like the old team would be genuinely believing and him telling to like this like old team and like I'm looking at that point like the old and that if the old team are being convinced uh like the scenario that I'm doing. So like that way like I'm trying to attempt at basically joining hands with like the whole thing and starting that rebellion with like the by having like the entirety of the 95 Squid candidate like teaming up to like fight off against like the Squid Games against like the people running the Squid Games that way for like trying to like put an end achieve goal of like putting an end to like the Squid Games. Like all that hope of like Sanjon will be like getting destroyed at that point, like the scenario that happens. So like at that point, it's like once like the election between like Sanjon and like the old man Korean candidates from like the old team will be over self like I'm looking like at that point self like I'm looking like the time limit of will be over and like I'm looking the lights would be turning off and the specific game will be beginning like the scenario that happens. So like I'm feeling like that way it's like the extremes would be like the narrative extreme would be like totally witnessing as like Sanjon's like attempting to like join hands with like the old team that attempt of like Sanjon failing like the entire the extreme would be witnessing all this. So like I'm looking at that point itself like once like the light would be turning off like I'm looking like the extreme at that point is starting to like stick to like import like strategy the strategical plan to attack first and that way the extreme totally charging into like attack like the whole team is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like that way like I'm looking like eventually I'm definitely protecting like sitting in my preparation that like I'm looking like once like that way like once like the ones who like that will be surviving like specific game can specific game in like the next game one. in like the revoting like definitely remember the mention that like the last person to vote in like the revoting being info and solely due to that single vote of info in like the revoting like basically like was the games continuing on to like the first games like the scenario that I was bringing and definitely I was bring like after like the first game and I was still remember the reason for like the first game it will be totally different, extremely different when compared to like the level of difficulty and danger of like the so far of like the first three games in like 2024. It's definitely remember so like I'm looking like the for two games and the would be extremely tough and extremely scary and I would be like uh, yeah, even after like the Squid game will be over like where I'm considering like after like Squid game I'm considering like about like maybe about like 60 Squid game candidates like are remaining after like around like 50 Squid game candidates would be like remaining after like two games is like around like a scenario that I'm whispering. So sure around 60 to like 70 to Squid game candidates is what I'm whispering would be like remaining in total after like specific games like the scenario that I'm whispering. So like even among them, like I'm looking like once like the special once like the fourth season will be like over, like I'm looking like the situation being like instantly from 60 like a huge cut down of like from 60 like I'm looking like around like 25 to like at most 30 civilian candidates alone would be like the ones that would be like surviving like support for number of civilian candidates that will be surviving the support civilians like the scenario that I'm looking at for those civilian candidate 25 around like 25 civilian candidates on both the project would be like only surviving like support civilian would be all at that point extremely scared and combat from like the extreme danger and difficulty of like support civilian like the scenario that I'm looking at like I'm thinking like once like the for Squid Game would be over like weekend or would be like totally the majority of time would be like totally desperate to like really to totally vote and to like as one of the only like the Squid like the scenario that I'm looking. But like at that point I'm looking twenty remember the incident would be when like that this would be happening where like the Squid Game workers would be like showing up and basically after showing like the money falling on to like the last big event like I'm looking like the single method at that point that basically make giving that up to message with shopping just of like a rebate to like the remaining developer to like the game of that they give there will be like no more voting like that's like the voting after like the third Squid Game was like their last chance at like to like basically leave like the game so like there will be no more voting after like will be along the lines like that will be happening after like the first game would be over like scenario that I'm looking so like the situation would be that the remaining 25 like the game ended is being protected like spot where like they would only have to like basically play like the entirety of like the 60 games like the all 60 games like scenario that I'm putting. So like I'm going that situation would be like totally causing a lot of panic tickling. But then like those remaining 25 games surviving looking at the like the scenario that I'm putting. And I'm looking it's being only at that point that I'm looking finally Sanjon being able to like get through to like the civilian candidates and to like get them through because like they were all extremely panicking and extremely afraid and like at that point I'm looking at it being Sanjon himself that alone that being that was killer of 20 for all of them and that would be at that point that like Sanjon actually would be once again becoming that absolute leader and like that the hope for like all those like remaining 25 effective civilian candidates after like the very first game is like the elected in the body like that so like that way I'm looking at that situation like I'm looking at that point like finally Sanjon will be able to get through to like all those remaining 25 to 30 civilian candidates like getting them to like basically to like join Sanjon to like to achieve that absolute goal of like basically putting an end of rebelling against like the civilians and putting an end to like the civilians and taking out to attack like the civilian workers and basically that way to take an end to like civilians and everything. So like Sanjon developing definitely to be finally succeeding in that creating that absolute unity between like the civilian candidates and basically creating that absolute rebellion after like the fourth game will be over. It's like getting the scenario that I'm over like and my friend. Yes, when it's the opportunity that I'm doing right now to for like maybe as part of like a Sanjon right now, bringing about it like uh it's a sort of like a rebellion against like the civilians like I'm looking definitely maybe like the scenario that I'm looking as for like the other person that I'm looking for like maybe that connected to the right shape or like say that had died like since like I think that say that had died Sanjon was like a right beside like say that while say that had died. So like I'm looking at maybe during that like right before say that had died back then in 2020, like I'm the say that might have passed on that crucial information to like Sanjot as for like their existing that like secret that passageway on like the ceiling that air ventilation secret passageway on the ceiling in like the rest of like this critical and crucial information I'm looking maybe like I'm looking right now like for example look at that like back then like say they are possibly having revealed it to like San John 5 or like that is to say that that is also like a possibility that I'm looking for. So maybe even to like the questions like San John might have not forgotten that at all. It's also like a possibility that I'm looking for. So like right now like San John totally telling like the extreme about like basically like with the people running like the city of being up there on the top like I'm maybe like Sanjon right now like creating that absolute ultimate strategy right now where like I'm doing since I think like basically 30 minutes or something is like remaining for like the full game like I'm doing like for the light return of time for like full game I'm doing right now maybe for like as part of like Sanjon like practical plan like I'm doing like Sanjon right now. Uh, as part of the plan, like Sanjom right now telling, assigning like the mother student candidate as well as like children to like basically for them to like probably go up to like the top of like the student candidate room and to for them to like tell like student workers that like they have to like use like the response. So like I'm looking that way, like definitely for like the student workers definitely since like the student would be like beginning in like 30 minutes, so like I'm doing like the student workers definitely not allowing them. So like I'm doing like definitely like I'm looking like the student candidate like doing her absolute best and like I'm looking like eventually finally succeeding in like breaking those like student workers into like basically opening that door to like the student candidate room. So like I'm the moment like they will be opening the door to like student candidate room, like I'm like children is like soldier like children will be like an exceptionally trained soldier, certainly not trained. Definitely children at that point like definitely totally lack or correct those to studio workers, even though they would be like I'm talking like children lack with that would still like I'm talking like offering force to studio workers like the scenario that I'm doing and I'm talking like if the situation would be like there will be only two studio workers in that area in that certain extent of like an area right outside like the studio candidate room that's would be like guarding like the studio candidate room is definitely never like so we just could game work up to a certain extent of that area, especially my preference. So like I'm talking once like children would be like taking both of them out like I'm like straight away like I'm talking and the city all part of like Sanjon's like brilliant plan. So like once children will be doing that like I'm like Sanjon and this like and team of like X team will be straight away rushing out to towards like that door and basically rushing out of like the student candidate room with like scenario that I'm looking at. So like the O team would be like totally confused as to like what's happening. And I'm looking like Spain probably rushing out of that door, and I'm looking like them Sandra totally telling like usually Sandra totally leading the way, and I'm looking like quickly that day like Sandra totally like that way like them all collectively are rushing into that costume was like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm like them totally rushing towards like that costume and also maybe credentials to that like there are like CCTV like follow like studio building like I'm looking like the moment like Sandra as well as like the entire day of like extreme that would be like escaping like the candidate room according to my preference. At that point says like the alarm would be like the alarm would be going off in like the entire capability game building for like game also. So like I'm looking like still I'm looking at them taking that risk and I'm looking like the candidates in like kind of extreme like I'm looking like a bunch of them ending up like getting taken off by the swing game of but still I'm looking like still like them not willing to like give up and basically contain that as their only hope. And basically that they like just like children's left and everything like them totally successfully managing to like basically even take out like the guards in front of like the restaurant as well as also like go to that and so like that way like them basically entering like making it to like the restaurant and basically them basically entering like the instrument is leave them like a great number of like civilian candidates from like the extreme that will be managing to like climb up and enter into that air ventilation pathway on the ceiling from like the scenario that I'm the trick. So that way like I'm looking at it might be during this time that I'm looking like like the last two studio candidates to like end up into like that air ventilation pathway to see like some studio candidates to like some other studio candidates like the scenario that so at that point I was like some studio candidate will be trying to like lift up like the other studio candidate and be to have be able to like make it into like entering into like that sitting air ventilation pathway like the scenario that I'm doing but like I'm looking the other studio candidate will be struggling to be able to like lift up and make it like the scenario that I'm doing so I'm like at that point, like I'm looking like choosing the other like and I'm like at that point, like since it would be like a narrow, since it is like kind of like a narrow pathway, like I'm looking like still like I'm looking like them not properly being able to like pull up like the masculine candidate into like the air ventilation areas like those narrow that I'm looking. So like I'm the alarm to be like going off within that time and like I'm looking like at like some masculine candidate will be struggling like I'm looking like all of them like stopping her effort and developing her with like a serious case feeling like for some Indian candidate to like uh, climb up first and I'm looking like some Indian candidate probably not agreeing to that and the front right themselves like a sound of like footsteps would be like almost approaching like the stone would be like getting hurt. So like I'm looking at that point like some other like totally like maybe slapping like the some Indian candidate and telling him to like a serious case to jump up and enter into that and escape through that air ventilation. So like I'm that way like I'm thinking like so that absolute regret and extreme guilt and while consumed with that absolute fear like I'm thinking like some Indian candidate like at that very last second like jumping up basically leaving like another Indian candidate behind according to her decision like this leaves that way like some Indian candidate to be escaping and entering into like that air ventilation series and I'm that way like on like the Indian workers would be like making it to like the rest at that point, I was like, it is like the mother studying candidate alone that will be all by herself in that restroom areas like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like I'm doing that way, like I was like San John, but the was like pushing, forcefully pushing like the Sun Indian candidate like away from like that air ventilation, deep into like the air ventilation area into like the ceiling is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like that way, like but the like some Indian candidate being forcefully pulled away by San John while being in that absolute fear and I'm looking like as like some Indian candidate will be getting pulled away by Sanjon deeper into like the method of like ventilation like I'm looking like at that point like I'm trying to some Indian candidate like probably hearing like the sound of like the and like the announcement of like the elimination of like the number of like the Indian candidate which would be exactly the number of like uh of it like mother cooking candidate like the scenario that I'm resolving and that be like the some cooking candidate like totally basically don't throw that absolute pain at that point of like uploading mother like within the scenario that I'm resolving and also right. And so like according to my contribution if this impact going to be interesting like in the scenario and like kind of extreme that way like possibly rank like nature like then I was looking why like the alarms would be like sent off and basically while alarms would be ringing and basically while like the remaining civilian also to be rushing towards like trying to like stop the escape like I'm looking maybe at that point definitely New York would be like totally making her move and I'm looking like maybe while like the team would be trying to like make their escape like I'm thinking maybe like that part of good game candidate like I'm looking like really getting captured by one of like the good game workers and as they would be like trying to attacking like I'm looking maybe at that point like New York slightly going to be person there and I'm looking like New York totally like taking taking out like that good game worker that other good game worker and I'm looking maybe like New York as well totally at that point like totally helping out like the those like the extreme escape is also like a lot of that and looking right. So like that's also like an interesting answer because like in your in like the person who be currently fed up with that experience and like at that point like seeing during that seeing them find like get like maybe like your at that point would be totally helping them out with their escape. So also like an possible scenario that I'm doing. So like if that happens then I would be like while they would all be like trying to make their escape and climbing on to like that air ventilation network and building maybe neon as well, like climbing up along with that, like the scenario that I'm keeping. So maybe that way, like from the leadership going from point to like neon as well as also like a possible that I'm making. So like neon will be like neon by now might have totally due to like neon like a rebellion that totally angering like the officers and like the other skill game workers and like neon being given that as the threat and everything like neon would have only would be that would have only studied like the blueprint of the game building and everything. So like New York and New York might be planning. Not might have already maybe might have like prepared for like such all sorts of like a situation where like he would be like having to like rebel and basically the city and the person were trying to like eliminate New York. So like at that point for like New York to like make that perfect escape like New York would be put out of reach even would already be maybe right now would be totally prepared as well. So like New York, so like in that way like New York would have studied like the city and building. Right? It's like the whole escape routes and everything within like city and this thing like New York might have probably steadily studied and observe the stuff legal information that way, like underprinting that when your process eventually happening with like the shooting candidate. It's also like about securing their escape. It's also like a possibility that I'm looking. So like that when you're being that up with huge major help for like Sanjos and like the his team is like extremes to that fight that against like the civilian against like people running the civilian. So also like an also scenario that I'm looking at. So that's like the minimum friends right now with like I'm going to explaining this like escape plan and hope being right there in front of like Sanjon. Like I'm delivering definitely still like I'm delivering like scenario like while Sanjon and like the extreme right now while they would be like making their escape like I'm delivering like in the case of like in terms of like in home won't be going along with like Sanjon and it's like escaping it's like the scenario that I'm so like the scenario that I'm delivering is for like in and with like import right now, like totally like looking extremely fierce right now while listening to like while hearing like Sanjon's like state plan like I'm definitely in hope would be like definitely will be extremely enraged with things definitely with yet like I'm like info not trying to like stop like Sanjon and just like extreme from escaping it's also like scenario that I'm doing by himself like straight away destroying like the plan to like outsmart the dark in like the standing guarding outside, like the cooking and it's almost like the scenario that I'm good. So like in first plan I'm friend would be to like most likely to capture Franjon alone, but at the same time while like the remaining of like 16 would be trying to like make their escape like at that point for like uh at that point I'm looking like info would be like totally I'm looking like even right now like I'm as like Franjon's like revealing his plan like info would be like totally or contemplating that like Franjon's like plan would be definitely not working out and like definitely them all would be getting eliminated while trying attempting like escape will be along the lines like even if it's like an ambush attack will be along the lines like in go like or constantly feeling it's definitely no frame so like I'm just like definitely able to bring like it would be like Neol that would be like I'm just definitely bringing would be like playing a major role in like Sanjon's like extreme being able to like initially make their escape and hide within like the air ventilation network of like doing the narrative that I'm able to bring. So definitely like Neo's betrayal would be like that absolute factor that like I'm putting like that like info won't be able to like keep coming with like the scenario that I was doing. So like that's like the scenario that I was doing. So like that way like so like currently right now as like Sanjay is like revealing his like plan escape plan in front of like info and all of them like all of the extreme like I'm just like info would be the only thing that with all of them would be like all like the extreme would be getting definitely eliminated while trying to like nature with like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm looking definitely the scenario to be like once like Sanjon and like the extreme would be like totally outsmarting the guards and like will be together like trying to like be running and trying to like make their escape straight away the alarm which would be running and at that time like info alone would be like not running along with like Sanjon and others with like those scenarios that I would but like other things like it's like extremely critical and dangerous like plan like I'm looking definitely Sanjon neither Sanjon nor anyone would be like even paying any sort of attention to like info they would be all like focused on like basically like being together and like trying to like make that escape together like was another so like none of that like taking info and everything while they only try attempting at their escape and will be like running uh through like this William building at that point like I'm sort like them not being like info not being the them like looking out there so like info at that point what info would be doing would be info like would be like from the ex candidate in like that uh, in that like studying and there's no at that point of like the scenario that end of the time. So like at that point, like once like Sangyon and like the others would be like sadly outsmarting the guards and like it's leaving that studying candidate to like at that point Philpa was different like info probably getting up and basically info probably like getting up and like basically info so they casually walking up to like and opening that door and slowly walking away out of like the speaking candidate room like the scenario that I'm looking like. So like straight away like I'm looking like info totally like giving the order to that after like leaving the studio and room like and then like involved like straight away giving the order to like the entirety of the game workers to like basically eliminate like all the escapees except for like Sanjo, like the scenario. This would be like the order that like info would be giving to like the civilian workers is like the scenario that I'm doing. And like the moment like at that point people considering like info not really leaving like the civilian candidate room, but like only leaving the civilian candidate room like info would be straight away like walking up to his like front man home to the next civilian building and basically all this straight away changing his like civilian candidate outfit and basically putting on like the frontman outfit of like in obviously that's the scenario that I was delivering. So that's the scenario that I was delivering and in things. It was like new difference right now as well. Like the first billion being over and basically with like this billion of like storming into like the game and then from like the firstly my potential right now is for like Sandron like plan to like basically hide under like hide on the floor like under like the bed wouldn't be just like that plan for like Sandron's team to like all them to like hide under that bed on the floor like basically won't be solely in the depth just only to like survive like a successful game alone is definitely memorable. There will be more behind that them like hiding under like the bed under the floor. It's definitely memorable. And that would be to like essentially even for like the counter attack once after like the first game to be over to like bring down like the civilian workers that storm into like the civilian and then just like building weapons after like civilian physically and definitely like Sanders plan right now considering will be more likely. So scenario that I'm considering right now is for like according to like Sanders plan, what I'm considering right now is for like as like the Squid workers like with them right now storming into like the Squid candidate room and considering like by the time like I'm considering Sanders will be basically waiting for like one of like the Squid workers to like totally to like show up to like the area of like the bed where like Sanjon and all of them are like obviously hiding staying hidden on the floor underneath the bed. It's definitely on the bridge. And at that point, like they would be only planning on basically even regardless of like and at that point like they would be only planning on like once like studio worker would be like getting near to where Sanjon and like end up seeing will be like lying hidden under like the bed. Like at that point for one of them to like basically whichever among them would be like at that point would be like closer to that Squid Game worker for them to like to pull at like the at that game was leg and basically that way pulled him down and caused him to like fall and basically that way for like one other among like Sanjon Spain to like that way at that point just basically steal just like weapon. So like I'm looking then for them to like quickly steal and quickly go back into like their hiding spot exactly where they are hiding under like the bed and from there for them to like use the weapon to like attack like those armed great number of like skill game from while staying hidden under like that bed area like the scenario that I'm doing. So like since it's like in like for kind of like a covered kind of like a place the area under like the bed on the floor is like a covered kind of like a to a certain extent like a covered kind of like a protective place like I'm just luckily that would be what like Sandron would be only betting on and where like betting on as like just as like one part of the like strategy is like basically that way while using the weapon while staying hidden from there like I'm looking that Sandron would only expecting that way for them to be able to like while managing to like eliminate a few civilian workers like they will be also if things go right, like Sunderland would only expecting at that point for them to be able to like take out like a few at least a few civilian workers while using the weapon from like such a hidden location while also simultaneously not being able to like have any of them or like most of the Sangyong's team members like take much of like an injury from like the attack of like the Studian workers due to like them hiding in like that most bottom portion of like under like the bed and everything is definitely not very much. So like at that point, what like Sanjon will be only hoping for as like the main crucial portion of his like ultimate strategy from the will be most likely uh, the thing where like Sanjon will only looking for like once like Sanjon one among like Sanjon's team would be like firing at like the Studian workers and they believe once like the Studian workers will be taking like the attack from like the weapon, and basically that way would be getting injured and would be collapsing. Like at that point, Silva brings like Sanjon without expecting that the remaining civilian workers who are like basically standing there and standing there in like that civilian candidate room, regardless of whether like they are like of like extreme or 14, but that absolute unity at that point, like they would be collectively attacking like the losing such like even like the post civilian candidates who are like past 14 will be like losing touch of the reality at that point and will be like simultaneously while while Sandro team would be like using the weapon and attacking the civilian workers. At that point, Sandro bit of what Sandro would only betting for would be at that point definitely for like those remaining civilian workers, civilian candidates, regardless of them being in or team or extreme, like collectively teaming up and like attacking, collectively simultaneously attacking like the civilian workers and basically trying to bring down like the civilian workers together. This is the what like Sandro would only betting on the minimum parameters and my parameters for like them losing touch of reality would be like that absolute strategy that like I'm going to be totally betting on it. It will be due to like a definitely skill game workers like basically once like after like entering into the skill game building and after like facing off again facing like the very first good game like this listen like Sandron will be like totally having a feeling as for like what the mindset of like the of each of the skill game candidates would be that is really since like it would be only like after like entering into like skill game building and after like facing like the skill game that the skill game candidates regardless of their dispute, each of them would be seeing them as like only in actual you would be only seeing them as two teams, a team of like green of like the skill game candidate and like the team of red of like the skill game workers who are like currently who are from like journey of over like the entirety of the games like up rolling over like the skill game candidates over fear of like by controlling them with fear by like skill game workers like all being arms with like weapons definitely necessary ambition. So like I'm through fear like I'm going to only seeing like the after like spending like after like since like right now it's like the second time Sangyeon is in like the full game building and playing studio like I'm looking Sangyeon will be right now will be totally absolutely certain that basically like definitely like the full game candidates will be like ruled over by like the fear of like towards like red shade of red of like civilian workers so it is like the civilian workers always being armed and everything so like I'm just relaxed the full game yeah, candidates like regardless of even right now with like the whole team so badly wanting to like continue playing games and everything like still once like that push would be given to them where like Sangyun's team would be like using the would be according to like Sangyun's plan under the like what like they will be using the weapon of one of the Squid workers and with that like once they will be like attacking the Squid Game workers like at that point they'll like that the whole team temporarily at that point like losing their full sense of like basically reality of like the person and basically them collectively teaming up with like the X team and like together like the green team attacking like the red team. Such a scenario would be what like Sangyeon would be only expecting because like the moment like Sangyeon team would be attacking like the game workers like Sangyeon would only expecting like that moment would be keeping like the green team, the team of like the remaining team of civilian candidates that like lost temporarily would be giving them that loss of fear towards like the red team, the team of like the game of and that resulting in like them totally like totally without them even like actually properly being aware like them like regardless of them wanting like a great number of them wanting like continuous like to gain like them still like automatically ending up attacking like this game workers and trying to like bring down like the game workers as like the bad athlete it would be what like Sanjay it would be like the kind of like the logic that like according to like Sanjay's ultimate strategy that like might be like Sanjay's ultimate strategy and which should be the, what like Sanjay would only expecting and betting on right now to happen is definitely my interest. So like just what I'm looking Sanjay right now would be attempting and like executing and like that totally working out even way better than Sanjay would be like expecting is definitely my interest because like I'm looking like Sanjay like I'm looking like according to my information one I'm looking like exactly in a similar manner like a Sangyon attempting at that point like once like the game workers would be like attacked by like the weapon by like Sangyon's team members like by one of like Sangyon's team members like or like Sangyon himself like using the weapon like at that point itself I'm like the remaining Squid Game and candidates all collectively, exactly like Sunburn is executing like attacking would be at that point like attacking like the Squid Game workers collectively as a team. It's like the scenario that I'm looking. And on top of that, like I'm looking like Neol as well at that point. Neol, like the game worker Neol at that point as well would be straight away like helping out like the attack of like Squid Game candidate on like Squid Game workers like the scenario by like Neol as well, just like totally armed like also attacking like the remaining Squid Game workers like instead of like the Squid Game candidate. It's also like the scenario that I'm in that way with like the help with like the help of like Sangyeon's own team members and with the help of like the remaining Squid Game candidates who would have survived like the Squid Game as well as like the combined help of Neon as well and bring them collectively like totally that absolute unity like totally bring down like those entirety of like the Squid Game workers that that has right now stormed into like the Squid Game candidate room after like the Squid Game is like right now, especially taking the scenario that I'm discussing on trains right now. So like my birthday ambition that I'm sitting on this that like even though info right now laptop team knows like fully aware of like Pantheon's like current strategy to like bring down like the great number of like Squid Game workers that have stormed into like the Squid Game candidate room like I'm still info not not at all attempting to like stop Pantheon's plans. Right now in like the present is definitely like the scenario that I'm thinking. So like I'm thinking like since according to my preparation, I was preparing like even with like the help of like the remaining Squid Game candidates as well as like Sangyong's team as well as like coupling with that with like Neo itself as well. Since right now I'm preparing like the was entirely of the Squid Game workers like coming into like that was storms into like the room being taken out. Like even at that point like I'm just like informed the Spring Navy like keeping up with like fake acting. It's like the scenario that I'm looking at. As if like it's like part of like Sandra's plan and everything. So like the new premise. So like I'm just maybe the and maybe I'm just like Sandra still being like unlucky. Like and it's like the scenario that I'm looking because like I'm looking maybe even though Neo is like a Squid Game worker and was like would have definitely been like a Squid Game might have been definitely been working as like a Squid Game worker way back in like the 20 Squid Games as well. And that might be the definite reason for like Neo totally back when like Neo was like before Sanjeon entering into that territory for 2 years like when Sanjeon was trying to like trying to like find like the parents of like Sadie of like basically back then when Neo had seen like Sanjeon in that scale like basically the fact that Neo was like staring at like Sanjeon like would be definitely because of like Neo totally recognizing Sangyeon as like a Squid Games winner of like the 20 Squid Games. Definitely remember it. Yet like I'm putting since like even then like since even while Neol might have been working as like a Squid Game worker for so long, still I'm looking like luck right now in like the person non being on Sangyeon's side and basically so the friend like Neol still won't be knowing like the identity of like the actual front man as that being in hope. Definitely remember the episode. So that's like even the scenario that I'm thinking. So like I'm just like even while with all their collective efforts, according to my research, that they bring like Sangyeon as well as like Neol and all of them together would be like taking out like the current studio workers that have stopped the two like the studio and their home still able to bring like uh that in sports totally still keeping up like the fake acting and basically Neol still not being like a recognized info like the scenario that I'm looking totally for it. So like and also my consideration for like after like Sangyeon's like the sport attack against like the studio workers so super English like the play different like without even realizing like naturally different like that whole man still game candidate as well as like the post to game candidate team as well like we are taking like game candidate as studio workers like scenario that I'm doing and after that like I'm doing like it would be then that they would be like actually realizing what they would have done for like the whole team is like the scenario that I'm doing still I'm doing like at that point like they would be totally feeling us like at this point, like after attacking like the stadium workers, like they wouldn't be having like any sort of like being able to like one day start over and continue playing like the studios from like the fourth studio would be 11 lines like I'm thinking like the whole team would be feeling or like Sanjon and the others will be like at that point feeling like the whole team was like the scenario that I'm playing. That way like I'm putting like even like the whole team as well. Whole team deciding to like basically go along with like Sanjon's plan and basically the O team and all of them like deciding to like the O team would be definitely like definitely absolutely adamant about like that O team wanting all that still them not leaving without like stealing all that money to like that last PT time, like the scenario that I was referring. So like that way, uh, yeah, like I'm doing like Sanjon telling them that basically like for all of them to like work together so that like they what they will be bringing down like the entire industry of the lecture building and the people running the experience like they will be able to like possibly steal all that money in like the last PT ban would be along the lines of like an offer that Sanjon and like Sanjon's team would be making to like voting and at least voting. Because like at that point, like would be feeling as if like they have no other choice and that we like the voting as well teaming up with like Sanjon's team and them all collectively would be exploring like the game building, trying to like totally find like the people at the very top of like game building, like running this games and everything is like the scenario that is. So like at that point, like after Sanjay's like team would have turned into like a whole group of like great number of people like the game candidates like scenario that I'm doing. So like at that point, I was just like that whole situation making it easy for like in whole to like easily slip out and basically easily escape from like Sanjay's side and basically straight away like info would be like going up to the like floor people will be taking that absolute shortcut route through which like Django in like the individual games have basically made it to like the front man through like through that path like like info totally going up to like the of like the front man of like info and like info putting on like the costume of like front man and like info at that point felt like giving starting like info's like fight against like Sanjo's like basically rebellion is like the scenario that I'm looking at info straight away like giving the order at that point like to like all the game workers to basically like eliminate the rebellion and basically like get like that order of inform the second info spelling like eliminate like the entire fix the rebellion except for like Sanjon is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like at that point like I'm looking like while like Sanjon's team would be at that point hearing that like to like keep Sanjon alone alive like I'm looking like them as well like their unity would be like at that point like we will take a hit and like I'm looking like the whole team would be like a suspicion would be like created within like the whole team at that point while they would be totally wondering as to like why like the or would which like them as well will be like hearing saying that to like basically men for like to gamers was like even telling them to like keep Sanjon as well. Sanjon alone alive. So also like a possibility that I'm referring. So like that way like I'm thinking like being like a slight bit of friction in their unity and everything is also like an individual possible scenario that I'm still like I'm looking like the whole team feeling as like they have no other choice and really then continuing on with their for and everything is like being the scenario that I'm thinking with. Okay, so like the minimum friends now right now for like moving forward, like the person online like this game right now is totally helping Sanjon out in like the rebellion and even taking like the life of like Squid Game watcher to like protect Sanjon and because it would be all due to like so still like having a plan to still live and emerging. So like importantly would be like so desperate to like to have like to not have Sanjon ending up dying right now. It's definitely my ambition because like in both like ultimate plan would be to like definitely eventually to like have like the realities showing up to like watch like the Squid Game by the time it would be like the first game would be over and everything that so even with like the rebellion happening right now like in host plan would be definitely to like exactly like how in hope ensure that basically definitely in hope using us like strategies like ensuring to like have like the Indians continue on from like the very first game while tricking everyone with like the offer to like basically leave like the Indians at any time for like the 2024 game even with like the reward money like like still that would all be like in hope like manipulation and tricking while in hope himself like disguising and showing up as like a Indian candidate would be definitely with that absolute confidence of or confidence that Info might have had that basically that lack with like Info presence as a Indian candidate Info would regardless of what our Sanjay strategies that like Sanjay would be doing to like basically to have like the Indian candidate that can leave like the Squid Game like Info easily able to like break all that plans and destroy all that plans of like Sanjay and like Info might have ended while the characters of Indian candidate like Info might have ended with that as well goal to like basically to ensure that like ensure Sanjay survives all the way into like the not only all the way to like the but also of like making it ensuring that Sanjay like survives and reaches all the way to like the game to face off against Info while at that point for like info to like make that upload stop and reveal to like Sanjon like info like the person running the keys while like the VIPs will be watching this and that way to give that absolute entertainment to like the VIPs and that way like to make this would be like like ultimate goals that human will face. But like even right now during like an info during like wouldn't even but maybe not even care about like the VIPs like probably finding out about like info identity. It's also like about that I'm moving maybe because like info by now would be like such like a powerful person right now, especially when so like I'm like info would be like probably absolutely all confident thing that they will even if like the VIPs who will be showing up to like watch like the games like finds out about like info identity still like info will be like easily able to like influence them and without like info getting into like any trouble while at the same time like getting them to like spend all that money to like to like really funding like the studios and everything here down the line to like info will be like absolutely on or how continue believing remember it. Like even right now while like the rebellion is taking place the fact that like info like only helping out like the info the person running the game is like helping out Sanjon and even saving taking the life of civilian workers to like save Sanjon like will be all due to like according to like info plans to like agree so that absolute stealth while maintaining that anonymity it was like ultimate like it's the ultimate priority of like info right now would be to like not only ensure like content survival, but also to like ensure that like info's like identity remains a secret from science that minimum research. So definitely info's like plan right now would be to like actually to help Sanjon out of like Sanjon's like whole rebellion of like an escape and basically to that way have like while Sanjon and his like team would be like essentially trying to like will be taking out like this game of and be trying to like attempting their escape like at that point for like info as if they like in a way as if like info like trying to like escape from like the speaking candidate room and basically at that point for like info to like stealthily inform like the officers about like the whole escape plan of like Sanjon and basically that way to like info to like tell give the or to like the officers to like really to eliminate all the people to building with like Sanjon except for Sanjon and that way for like Sanjon alone getting captured to have Sanjon alone get captured and basically be brought back and put back into like Mexican candidate for along with like info as well. And that way for like at that point for like info maybe to like only sit on a fake actor to like info as well tries to like escape but like was caught by like the civilian workers and basically still like the exactly like in Sanjon's case that the civilian workers didn't eliminate info and forced exactly like Sanjon's case like the civilian workers have for info as well to like continue playing civilians like and that way like like once again for like info to like get Sanjon back into like the games along with like info as well might be like this for like the possibility that I'm doing as well like what info current plans might be it's definitely might be very interesting. So okay, so like a few things right now for like Sanjion's like a rebellion team that is really taking out like majority of its game of the thing that and the film that I'm doing still as for like how me also be surviving and the thing like the scenario to be like I'm doing like during like the rebellion of like Sanjion like I'm doing like right now since like I'm doing like in like Sanjion's rebellion team like I'm doing one of like the member ending up dying right now. It's like the scenario that I'm seeing, and that really like leaders like father, like the scenario that I'm seeing. That father should be ended up in something like during this current rebellion, ending up dying of like the scenario that I'm living. And at that point, this will bring back actually New York would be like one of the Game of Thrones would be taking the life of that father figure candidate. It's like the scenario that I'm living, and New York this entire time might have definitely not exactly like Sanjon for revenge and sort of like scenario that I'm living. So like I'm living at that point would be when like I'm looking New York at that point that might be like the last or like New York. So like at that point that New York would be right now would be present in like keeping and from at that point using her exceptional skills like I'm from like New York totally instantly taking out like a bunch of civilian workers like instantly by herself. Like the scenario that I'm doing. And at that point like I'm doing Sangyeon as well as like Sangyeon team, all of them being totally shocked. Seeing just like one civilian worker like basically taking out like a bunch of like the civilian workers that they are right now rebelling against it. Like the scenario that I'm so like that will be how like I'm like Sangyeon's team won't be like attacking Neo. It's like scenario and Neo will be surviving and that way Neo that painting up being part of that Sanjay theme and that interrogating that absolute shocking surprise of like a realization that like the within that time there was like a traitor among like the that would be along the lines like important thing that we within that time that there was like a traitor among like the gamers. Uh, and that being like Neo would be along the lines imported or getting definitely also my brain. So like at that point, if I can put an info would be like getting information and then for the thing at that point info definitely fixing in his mind to like eventually definitely to ensure to like eliminate Neo eventually like the scenario that I'm going to try and try. So look at the minimum friends and right now as for like Sandal right now asking like to see and they know how to use weapons and that straight away jumping like shaking heads towards like the empty container that near to bring it to be because like I'm bringing maybe like both like either both like the indie going guy as well as like Jansi might have trained a lot at like using weapons and might be like if the person might be like exceptionally skilled at like wielding weapons. It's like one possibility that I'm looking bring or like I'm looking might be that the entry point guy alone that like might be exceptionally trained at like using weapons is like sort of possibilities that it looks like. So like I'm looking like still I'm looking like then we might be like totally worried about like the safety of like the entry point guy and I'm looking like that might be like the reason for like John here right now shaking her head towards like the Indigo guy is definitely never family. So like Janki will be totally feeling that basically regardless of like them their rebellion like basically right now being a success like still like I'm looking like Janki will be like totally afraid of like what's coming like basically with like Janki will be totally expecting like the retaliation from like the side of like the people running this game would be like towards stream that basically so if like the Bitcoin guy like tells to the truth and basically reveals to like Sanjon that he might definitely know how he might be skillful at like using weapons like then like then he might be hearing like the possibility of like the Bitcoin guy ending up becoming like part of like the front part being part of like the front lines of like the rebellion of like Sanjon. So like that way like the possibility of like Janhi losing like the MG coin guy like would be something that like Janhi would be totally afraid of. That's the main reason. Mainly the reason for like Janhi right now totally deciding like might shaking her head towards like Janhi coin guy right now. It's definitely my friend right. It is like the claim of prevention right now as for like right now all the weapons from being in like the side of like Sanjon and just like extreme and like with like Sanjon and then they like trying to like turn things around into like as of like the priority being like that of like them wanting them have like escape from like the city building like I'm looking still like I'm looking like the whole my student candidate as well as like the majority of like the voting of like student candidates like I'm looking still not agreeing to like just simply just escape from like student building. I'm looking like definitely I'm looking right now for them to like totally even propose like Young's like whole this whole plan to like just completely escape. Like I'm looking like the old man Korean candidate right now telling Kang Young and Janbe that basically that like they are ready to like escape, but only the like the after like taking away all that money from like that class three and like basically would be along the line like that like I'm doing like the uh, old man in like the voting telling Kang Young like to which like the majority of the voting would be agreeing. So like I'm doing like that way like I'm just like Sanjon has them totally deciding to like totally force their way into like basically simultaneously while bringing down like the people running like Civilian and putting an end to like Civilian also like simultaneously also taking away all that money from the piggy bank and then to like escape and leave like just to get building. It's like the eventual conclusive kind of like a decision in which like they will be coming to definitely member frame it. So like that way like I'm looking it will be only under such a condition that like I'm looking maybe right now maybe that like the fourth team as well would be like finally deciding to like agree to like team up like and work together with like kind of like a rebellion. It's like the scenario that I'm doing right now I'm not sure. Okay, so like the female friends right now have got like Sandon, like a rebellion with like Sandon, and it's like so advancing even out of like the full event with balance suffering definitely eventually like scenario that I'm definitely would be one like Sandon and then like hopefully would want like they would be advancing far into like the taking out like the game of the considering far ahead into like the full game, but like I'm looking like eventually like Sanjay and his team being put into like the spot kind of like a situation where like I'm doing like definitely while Sanjay and group are like frustrating the their Brazilian like I'm looking like on the other hand I'm looking like definitely the officers on the referring would be totally sending like a bunch of like civilian workers to like the civilian candidate home and I'm looking like them totally like those great number of like Indian candidates that have decided like the majority of Indian candidates that have decided to like stay back like the Indian candidate home like I'm putting them totally getting bonus by like a bunch of Indian workers like the scenario that have the so like then like I'm looking like by the time like Sanjon and his like for example then really make we making it to like the room of like where like the officers would be like I'm just maybe at that point like in like the TV just like TV that would be like TV screen that will be present there like like them the officers straight away showing Sangyeon and his like entire group like just like visual of like basically all those like civilian candidates who stayed back at like civilian candidate home like basically being surrounded by civilian workers, armed civilian workers and like the officers are basically at that point threatening Sangyeon to like to drop and stop the like a rebellion or else like basically all those like majority of like those remaining studio candidates like will be eliminated straight away. If like Kanjon and Rope doesn't get it to them like the scenario that I'm just talking about. So that is like the scenario that I'm looking at that point like I'm looking through that screen like I'm looking like Kanjon totally Kanjon and like Kanjon's team members like totally seeing like that possibly that like some and like that another Indian candidate who were like who used to be like part of writing like who kind of in a way had like formed like a certain extent of like the board and especially was like chosen like totally having that deep kind of like a certain extent of like a bond with like that some and like that another Indian candidate and so that way like and Janhi since like Janhi was like part of like Sangam's team and also like basically the stack weapons pointed at like all of them would be what like would be Sangyeon and like Sangyeon's approach will be seeing through that TV screen like through that monitor like the scenario set in open right. So like at that point I'm looking like Sangyeon and his team totally like feeling kind of like vulnerable at that point of like the scenario that I'm looking at referring. So at that point it's when I'm looking like most likely at that point when I'm looking like Janho and his team would be like finally would be making it and would be like making the infiltration in and would be making it to that very same Squid Game candidate or like the scenario that after like I'm looking that way like it's being to jump off and his like team like infiltration exactly happening due to like that up to sheer luck of like the civilian candidate that remains civilian candidate to chose to like remaining like the civilian candidate from like due to the sheer like I'm looking like at that point it's exactly like Jumbo and his like chase making it in time and basically practically through that interpretation of like Jumbo and his team that Amazon like those Indian workers and would be getting taken out and those Indian candidates the majority of them would be getting who would have chosen to like remain who would have been held at that point held hostage by Indian workers at that point would be like the majority of them getting saved at that point through solely through like Janko and his like teams like infiltration like the scenario in the scenarios that I'm about to solve and not three so like that like the moment that happens itself like I'm like Sanjong totally with that absolute we have that absolute my on it like face and I'm looking straight away like the office of getting captured so like the scenario that I'm looking so like and like the whole interrogation of like the objects of really happening at that point is like the scenario that I was saying. But like I'm saying, even like the objects as well, like this new like hierarchy of objects as well being set up like will be also part of like Inho's like strategic ultimate strategical plan subliminal plan because like Inho might have thought to like even like the extent of like the worst possible scenario and that might have been the like that was possible scenario that Inho might have thought of while deciding to like have Sangyong play as like the part of like the civilians of like entering to like civilians of unity before might be like what would be right now happening. Then like civilian building with like Sanjon like and Sanjon like creating like a rebellion and basically and all that especially in perimeter. So like in home might have only foreseen such a worst case scenario even before like the 2024 season might have begun. And that might be the reason for like in home might have like consciously decided to like create a new hierarchy of like an officer like largely like the front man like that might be how like it might be only right now in like the 2024, 2024 billions alone that is like new hierarchy of like officers wearing like black outfit of like kind of similar to that of like same kind of similar even though not exactly the same still it being black costumes kind of like in a way to a certain extent similar to that of like the comments but news and that as well would be like in hope like plan to like totally considering like the worst case scenario if such a worst case scenario happens to like only for example which definitely might prevent so only like on it or them into thinking that maybe that possibly might be like the front man there's also like about that and something like even though the it would be just like Indonesian for like the front man chasing like changing it like the time like changes from electronic for along the lines to like only for example even if like Sandon makes it all the way to like the people to like for example in such a manner and to thinking that like the officers are like the people that basically that like they're running like the CPM and that way to like think like Sanjon has totally put for Sanjon the thing that he has totally particularly like sitting in it bring about and to like the civilian by capturing and stopping like the officers that way to like for Sanjon and that way for like info to like still easily that way manage to like escape and basically for like that way for like info to like totally be able to like keep running like again and basically to form like a by forming like a counter strategy against like Sanjom like the next year will be all like perfectly thought out by info ahead of like even like within the students might be like that different situations like the that I'm looking so definitely this so this like the scenario that I'm looking Sanjom and it's like so like eventually making it all the way into like finally capturing like the officers and thinking that it's like the command is like the person running the experience. But like I'm looking to the only one like Jan Ho's team like after the infiltration will be catching up to where like Sanjay will be and like would once like Jan Ho will be seeing like the face of like the officer and shockingly finding out that it's not his own that it will be only at that point that like I'm like Jan Ho will be telling Sanjay that like basically maybe it will be only at that point that maybe Jan Ho will be like uh, privately revealing to like Sanjay alone, maybe that like that's not the person running like the Squid game, and basically that like about like info being it being info and like info being like jump of brother, and maybe like softly will be to the kind of maybe being only at that point that like Sanjay totally and jump of softly finding out that basically that like Squid Game candidate who was like playing like the tournament of Squid Game along with like Sanjay to send that time with like that number one Squid Game candidate outfit like was like think of the send that time the person running a Squid Game and the send that time was with Sanjay like at that point like Sanjay and Chantos softly realizing it's like the such a scenario even the scenario final scenario like what I'm referring towards like the end of season two the Squid Games and at that point itself like I'm like Sanjay will be probably like checking around and like would be like shortly finding out that we was like probably missing and that's like still the scenario that I'm doing. So like after that like I'm doing the next time info would be contacting like Sanjay is like I'm the would be most likely in like the very next year and after that like I'm like after like the whole rebellion I'm doing like towards the end of the rebellion like info topic being missing like the scenario that I'm doing. So like that way like I'm doing Sanjay will be really trying to like find like info for like the remaining Sanjon and Jumbo will be really trying to like find info for like the remaining of that year and I'm like it will be only in like the next year as by the time like info will be like certainly setting up like the uh setting up like probably maybe like a new Squid Game setting in like a new Squid Game island by like the next year. That's also like about that and then like it will be only it will be only by the time like it will be info will be like would have done all the preparation and would be like about to like start like the Squid Games in like 2025 that I was like being right before that like I was like info will be making us like next fall in like towards like Sanjon so the phones like now that I'm like after that whole rebellion of like Sanjon right now like I'm just like the next time like towards the end of it, like Sanjay and Sanjay not finding info. And basically, the next time after that, like Sanjay will be hearing info voice being through like this like phone call it should be in like the next year, like 2025, as like Info will give up to start off like the 2025 skill games to have like Sanyo enter into like the 2025 skill game, where like Info would be totally wanting to like compete against like Sanyo and maybe to uh, what like Info would be like totally trying to like achieve in like the 2024 season, which definitely I'm like imported only failing at this due to like Sanjon's like rebellion being a success. Like so like just very same thing like I'm like import trying to like achieve in like the 2020 season. But like I'm saying like the only difference would be like there won't be that whole suspense of like Sanjon not knowing that like info is like uh, not knowing that like info is like the person running the experience at the 2025 CTM. It's like similar scenario that I'm doing. Yeah, like I'm doing like that 2025 students I'm doing totally bet being based on a bet that like during that phone call before like 2025 students like info will be making like Sanjon that basically just Sanjon is able to like defeat info in like the 2020 students then it's like info would be like stopping like the two games for like once and for all. So like along the lines like so like I'm looking like the two games like in the two games like only one can make it through like the very two games and survive like I'm going to like that like as like a getting kind of like an absolute challenge like put for getting put forward by info towards like Sandy to see which among them is like the better two game player and that will decide the fate of like the school games, not of like the school games will continue or not. And that way, like I'm telling at that point, like Sanjon only agreeing to that challenge and literally that way Sanjon like willfully entering into like the 2026 school game, but that leaving no intention at that point to like to start a rebellion or anything, but like look like that only intent to like basically while being well and fully aware that while in who would be still in like the 2025 to be as well. So the in who would be still that very in that very same number one in that to gain candidate like outfit and like Sanjon as well being civilian candidate with like the exact number of like I think like for as well and basically with like for Inno and Sanjon knowing each other at that point and each of them competing against each other to like be that ultimate victor of like the 2020 civilian which will decide like the fate of like the civilians is like in the scenario that I'm referring as a fight range.